Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 8 of Naruto, Student of Madara. If you guys enjoy this what if, and want to see part 9 of it, comment down below, and let me know. The like goal for this video is 150 likes. So like this video, to let me know that you're interested in this series, and you want the next part. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Naruto Uzumaki, more commonly known by his alias Ryu Yakuze, was currently creating a special seal that would be tattooed on his body. He was kneeling on the floor of his new hotel room. The only article of clothing on his form was a pair of black pants. After his kidnapping at the hands of the Iwan Inn, his old hotel room was damaged, much to the anger of the hotel manager. There were multiple sealing symbols transcribed over his body, and all converged on the back of his neck. "Is it ready, Zetsu?" questioned Naruto with deep authority. Yes, replied the plant man. "But why am I doing this? I don't wish for a repeat of my kidnapping a few days ago. Sealing isn't an easy art. It takes time to create advanced seals that could have warded off the Iwan Inn, such as barrier seals. But they take time that I do not have the luxury of having," clarified Naruto. The Uzumaki was deeply disappointed in himself on how easily he was captured, but like he said, barrier seals and protective wards are not easy to create, and therefore he didn't have time to create them, not since he was juggling around with missions from the Mizukage in his date earlier. This seal Zetsu is similar in design to my chakra nature seals on the palms of my hands, where I subconsciously channel chakra into the seal, and when I activate it, it changes into one of my nature affinites. However, this seal activates on its own when it feels a disturbance in my chakra, when I'm under genjutsu, or when my body is feeling sensations it shouldn't feel. When I'm under genjutsu, it disrupts the flow of my chakra, breaking me from the genjutsu, and say if I was unconscious, it would send a jolt of lightning chakra through my body, restarting my brain, breaking me from unconsciousness, explained Naruto, to which Zetsu nodded in understanding. It must have been taken a while to develop. "So how do I focus the seal on your neck?" asked Black Zetsu. "Perform the boar, tiger, snake, horse, rabbit, and ox hand seals, then place your hand on my neck and focus your chakra in your palm," continued Naruto. Zetsu performed the necessary hand seals and placed his hand gently on Naruto's neck, where the symbolic markings over the blonde's body crept their way up his body, focusing itself on the back of Naruto's neck. Zetsu wondered if this was painful for Naruto, but he detected signs of agony from the Sharingan wielder. But Naruto had a high tolerance to pain from his training with Madara, so this really was painful for him. All the symbols on Naruto's body had finally arrived on his neck, and Zetsu removed his hand and beheld a sun that had curved flame sprouting from it. "Thank you, Zetsu," said Naruto bluntly as he placed his hand over the seal. "Tell me, have you found a training area that suits my tastes?" asked Naruto emotionlessly. The plant man shook its head at this, which caused Naruto to sigh. The training ground within the mountain's graveyard was not yet finished, even with the amount of White Zetsus working on it. "And what would you prefer from a training ground?" asked White Zetsu, grinning. Naruto stared at Zetsu in restrained annoyance, and he elaborated on the question. "Someplace dark where the light of the sun doesn't shine as brightly, so I can improve upon my senses. That doesn't require sight, preferably with lots of terrain, so I can adapt to an environment where the land doesn't favor me. Also a place cut off from society where not many people would know of its existence. That would be perfect," spoke Naruto as he prepared some green tea from the hotel room's small kitchen. Zetsu nodded at his master's command. But there was one question which was confusing the plant man, a question that was gnawing at his mind. "Why didn't you kill Sasuke Uchiha?" queried Zetsu. Naruto stared neutrally at Zetsu, while drinking his tea. White Zetsu knew that stare all too well. It always unnerved him, and the end result was he'd either end up on the floor dead or Naruto would answer him, although Black Zetsu had nothing to fear. "You're asking why the one person in the entire world that I had a perfectly legitimate reason to kill." Naruto stopped his sentence, choosing his words carefully. "You're asking why I spared him, and not the other way around." Zetsu nodded again at the blonde. "I wish to kill Sasuke Uchiha when he is at the prime of his power, when he is ready to face me in mortal combat like last time. I wish to feel the thrill of fighting with a powerful opponent. I wish to feel my blood pumping through my arteries and adrenaline coursing through my body, while sweat drips off my brow, and my knuckles become bloody from all my attacks," said Naruto with a sickly smile. "I didn't kill him because I wanted to. I didn't kill him because he didn't deserve to die by my blade. He's still weak, and until we have the same eyes, he's not worthy of being called my equal or greater or lesser. I was thoroughly disappointed with his growth in power unlike mine," continued Naruto. "He doesn't have the same potential that you do," stated Zetsu. Naruto shrugged his shoulders at the dual-colored man. "You know, I was surprised that the old goat let me live after he found out about that detail," uttered Naruto, moving the conversation away from Sasuke. Zetsu agreed with the blonde. He could only theorize why Madara had let Naruto live after he found out about that certain information. Maybe because he did it to spite that Ma. But Zetsu stopped his sentence. when he heard the sound of a door opening from within the hotel room. And in walked Conan wearing her Akatsuki garb, her neutral expression in full force. The blue-haired woman had accepted the fact that Ryu would speak with Zetsu often. The plant man spy would be Yakuza's most trusted confidant. He just wouldn't trust her off the bat, and she didn't really trust him either. He still hadn't told her the details of his plan, but she only assumed that he would. "I wish to speak with you," stated Conan. Ryu shrugged his shoulders, which to Conan was a sign to go ahead. Alone. Ryu turned his gaze onto Zetsu, a silent signal to the plant man. Zetsu started to disappear into the ground, its Venus flytrap appendage closing. When Zetsu had left, Ryu turned his attention on Conan, as if saying with his eyes, "You have my attention." Conan took a deep breath and decided to say what was on her mind. "I wish for you to meet Nagato," spoke Conan with utter surety. "I met him barely 2 weeks ago." "Deadpan Naruto." Conan sighed, exasperated. "I meant the real you," continued the female Akatsuki member. "Nagato must know that he's being manipulated by your fake Obito." Naruto continued to stare at Conan passively. Nagato may be under the effects of genjutsu. Obito was able to control Yagura, the Yondaime Mizukage, and a Jinchuriki. Placing a Jinchuriki who had full control of their Biju in a genjutsu is not an easy thing. In fact, it may be impossible for someone without the Sharingan, disclosed Naruto. "How can you be so sure?" questioned Conan. "It's a likely theory, because it sounds like something I would do," pronounced Ryu. Conan continued to stare at Ryu, unsure of what she should say next. Her mind was a whirlwind of words. Although she was now a part of Ryu's plan, she wasn't told all of the details. She had hoped to be informed of them later. But she could silently agree that they needed more lieutenants. "Is anybody within the Akatsuki working with Obito?" asked Conan. "I believe so. Kasame would be the most likely suspect, since during his time within the Land of Water, Obito would have met with Kasame and offered him a position as his right hand, and he would have brought up his stupid prospects so to coerce him," spat Naruto. Conan agreed with the Sharingan bear, since it sounded likely that Kasame would work with Obito, since the swordsman was a staunch supporter of Yagura. "I will not meet with Nagato, not until Obito has been dealt with, and that's a few months away. We will continue to act like regular Akatsuki members in the meantime," proclaimed Naruto. "Also, you should read this," said Conan as he took out a book from within her cloak and handed it to Ryu. Page 14. Ryu turned to the specific page and beheld a picture of him that Konoha had used. "Which country does this bingo book belong to?" "Land of Lightning. Care to explain how you were in the Land of Lightning when you were with me and the Mizukage here in the Land of Water?" said Conan with barely hid curiosity. Ryu seemed to sigh, and his shoulders deflated. "In good time, but for now let's just, what do the teenagers call it, let's chill," said Naruto awkwardly. And even now he still lacked true social interaction, and obviously didn't understand some idioms. "Kumagakure, 1 day earlier." "What?" came the booming voice of the Raikage that was heard throughout his village like a sword piercing flesh. The Raikage clenched his fist and smashed his desk, splintering it into pieces. His assistant Mabui didn't seem fazed by the fragments of the desk striking her face. "What do you mean that the Kagero temple was raided?" roared the Raikage in his right-hand man's face. "It's exactly like I said, boss. The Kagero temple was raided," said Dari in his aloof voice, and his slouch position only testified to his somewhat lazy personality. And if the oncoming migraine wasn't enough for the Kage, his brother burst through the door. "Yo, say ho, bro." "Yeah, rap Killer B and shuffling about." "I apologize if my raps are terrible. I can't rap for shit." "Oh wait, B," yelled the Raikage as he elbowed the Hachibi Jinchuriki in the face, causing anime tears to spiral from the muscled rapper's face. "Why do you have to be so mean? I'm only living the dream," cried Killer B as he curled into a ball from his brother's scolding and abuse. Taking the attention away from his idiot brother, A focused his attention on his assistant and his close confidant. "Dari, were there any survivors from the temple?" questioned the Raikage as he practiced his anger management exercises. "Yeah, boss, only one. His wounds were not that bad, and I had Mabui look into his psychological damage." "This is so dull," said Dari mellowly. And nodded his head at the somewhat lazy shinobi. "Then have we interrogated the survivor?" asked A as his temper was soothed. Mabui decided to answer. "No, we were waiting for your permission to start the interview," spoke Mabui with calmly. "Alright, start the interrogation immediately. I need to find out who has the relic that the monks were guarding, or if they did find it," said A as he hastily walked out the room with Mabui and Dari trailing behind, leaving B behind, who also followed after them, though he was a bit behind, and he had a large bump on his cheek. While on the way, A voiced more of his questions. "Who was it that discovered the temple was raided by outside forces?" asked the Raikage along with Dari, Mabui, and Killer B, who had caught up to the trio. "It was Yujiro Ni while she was coming back from a mission you had assigned her," answered Mabui, who still had a calm persona. "And in what state was the temple when she discovered it?" Apparently, boss, most of the monks were slaughtered, their limbs torn from their bodies, and their throats and other vital organs were nothing but mashed up blood. It wasn't a dull sight. She activated her flare kunai and alerted our teams to her location. I myself was among one of the teams that saw the flare, answered Dari as he scratched the side of his head. I nodded at this. But still, how did someone find the temple? It's cut off from society, except for high-level shinobi of Kumagakure who are aware of its existence, said Mabi curious. None of the three bothered to look behind them, and saw B working on his raps. I don't care as long as they don't have the relic, it's fine, replied A, who had lessened his pace. The four Kumo shinobi had their Anbu HQ in sight. They traveled to the room to where the survivor was, and they found Yujiro Ni standing outside the door, as if waiting for them. Raikage-sama, said Yujiro, who bowed slightly. The Raikage nodded his head. Dari tells me that you were the one that discovered the monastery in disarray, said the Raikage. Yujiro nodded her head at this. I was also the one who discovered the only survivor among the monks, responded Yujiro. He's inside, but be careful, he suffered serious mental trauma and is now easily scared from the experience. His name is Akusa, and Raikage-sama, please be gentle with him, spoke Yujiro softly. I opened the door and saw the survivor sitting by a table on a wooden chair with another chair directly adjacent from the survivor. But A was shocked to discover that the survivor was only a 10-year-old boy who wore the monk's standard article of clothing. Gray and white hakamas with long sleeves that covered their arms and hands, but instead of the red obi tied around the waist, the boy's obi was light blue, possibly signifying his rank among the monks. So this was Akusa. I sat down in the free chair directly opposite the boy. Tell me, Akusa, what happened at the temple, and who raided it, queried A. There was so much carnage, said the boy as he remembered the events of the slaughter, specifically the white tiger. It had almost found the boy while he was hiding, he had almost died, and the man in the black armor. He scared him the most. He just seemed empty, as if he didn't have any emotion, like he truly lacked emotions or remorse. He remembered as his father, Tatakai, confronted the man only to be met with death as he watched his father, murdered before him like a sick animal, using the relic he had sworn to protect with his life. There was a man, spoke the boy. I leaned forward, listening to every word that came out of Akusa's mouth. He wore black samurai-like armor and had a long, sleeveless coat, and its edges were tattered, along with a hood and 3 silver magatama on each collar. He also had blonde hair and red eyes. A's eyes widened in recognition. He had heard of this certain individual matching Akusa's description. It had to be him, there was no one else, but he needed more information. Does he have the relic? Does he have the dragonfly-cutting sword? Asked A hastily. Akusa stared into the Kage's eyes, his brown eyes searching for something. Yes, he used the sword too. But he stopped in his sentence, and he choked up as tears fell from his eyes like rain. To murder my father. A's eyes widened in sorrow and fear. Tatakai was an old friend of his past, but both went their separate ways when they were teens. And to hear he was dead broke him, but he had to get over his death, and now the dragon had the Tamajiri. Mabi, write down anything Akusa can tell you of the perpetrator's abilities. I need to write down a new entry in the bingo book, and from now, Akusa, you are now a shinobi of Kumo, said A as he left the room with Dari following him and B writing his raps while Yujiro went her own way. The Raikage could see that Akusa wanted vengeance. He was too depressed to see it, and if he wanted to avenge his father, the path of a monk couldn't give him the opportunity, but a shinobi only then could he avenge his father. When A entered his office, he took out a bingo book, Konoha's bingo book, and read everything there was on this certain ninja. He scoured every page of the raider of the Kagero temple, and he frowned and scowled. Everything about the man spoke about a person bred to kill. Trained in every aspect of shinobi arts and combat, a man who could rival a Kage. If the Raikage compared shinobi to animals, then they would be dogs and this man, a wolf. Ryu Yakuze, snarled the Raikage. Now in Konoha, Tsunade Senju was tending to her duties as Hokage of Konoha. She was conflicted. Why? She is about to reveal the greatest secret and disappointment to the village about a certain young, dead, blonde. She had argued with herself for months. She had consulted with Jiraiya, Kakashi, Shikaku, and they all said the same thing: wait until they've calmed down, then tell him. There was also supposed to be another member on that list, a boy who was like a son to her. She turned her head to the left, and saw a photo of her, and the blonde Uzumaki on the road to Konoha hugging and smiling, and she too smiled herself at the happy memory. She felt something wet on her cheek, and when she brushed her hand over it, she alone teared. She would admit it in a heartbeat. She loved the blonde-like family. She should have done more for him. She should have been there for him. She should have owned up to her mistakes and rectified them. She should have promised her that she would look out for him, and what good did that do? The necklace she gave him really was cursed, since it had taken yet another life of someone important to her. She pressed her fingers into the sides of her temple. She had to be careful. She was treading on treacherous ground. Even the slightest step could cause the dominoes to fall. Sarutobi had hoped to tell Naruto when he became Chunin, and after he died, she hoped to do that as well. And she could tell that despite being a moron, and not the brightest knife in the drawer. Naruto had enormous amount of potential. She hadn't seen so much potential to be powerful in someone before, not Jiraiya, or Ichimaru, Tsukumo, not even Minato. She believed, no, she knew that someday Naruto would surpass her grandfather Hashirama, even without the Kyuubi no Yuko. She then frowned. The Kyuubi hadn't been seen in years as its chakra was still coalescing, and the fox hadn't taken shape yet. Tsunade had less than 3 years until the Kyuubi reformed. And without people like her grandfather Hashirama Senju, Madara Chihara Kushina Uzumaki, then capturing the Kyuubi would be impossible. She turned her chair and stood to face her village, and it seemed the weather was attuned to what she was feeling right now. The sky was completely gray, the clouds shrouded the bright blue like a blanket, the sun's light was dimmed, and also it looked as if it was about to rain. She could also hear the cracking of thunder emanating from the clouds. And she noticed that the village was darker, as if eclipsed by the clouds, giving everything a gray appearance. The weather was just too depressing. Hamura and Koharu had advised against announcing Naruto's heritage forever, but she was Hokage, and the people deserved to know that their greatest hero had died leaving a legacy, and that legacy was betrayed. Her thoughts burned through her like a fire. Jiraiya didn't want to be in the village when it happened. He claimed that he already knew the reaction from the populace. Things would have been easier if the white-haired man was with her. She heard a knock at the door, and she ushered the person in. And a certain masked ninja with gravity-defying silver walked through. "Are you going to do it today?" asked Kakashi. Tsunade nodded at Kakashi. "You know there's going to be an uproar," stated Kakashi. "I don't care, they deserve to know the truth, and they can't deny it, we have extensive proof," said Tsunade. His back was still facing Kakashi. "What about his full heritage?" asked Kakashi. "That will be told later, just not now," spoke Tsunade. However, the two occupants were unaware of the third party watching them from the roof. "It's time. I hope he's finished his project." With Naruto, he was currently drawing seals on a certain article of clothing, something he had been creating before his father had died. He had spent the last 6 months juggling between his training and creating the perfect ninja outfit aside from his armor. Although it was useful and he loved the look of it, he needed to be more shinobi-like in appearance, Zetsu's words. So he was creating an outfit perfect for him both in style and usefulness, and imbuing seals into it which would only enhance its purpose. And he was just about done. And at that time Zetsu materialized from the ground, the only thing visible of the genetic clone being his Venus flytrap. "Naruto, it's time," spoke Zetsu. Naruto nodded at his subordinate with his emotionless visage in full force. Naruto stripped everything off him excluding his boxers. Zetsu just watched. And so the blonde started dressing himself in his new outfit. He now wore sleek black pants that ended on his heels, along with black calf-high boots with silver lining and black gloves. But the most notable thing about his new outfit was his new cloak, which was black in color and double-breasted, and twin-tailed with a hood and long sleeves. The collar was high and extended near his chin and covering his neck. It also had a zipper that fastened from top to bottom. But Naruto left it unzipped from his waist down to provide him more maneuverability. The cloak also had silver drawstrings decorated with silver beads hanging from the end, and a chain ornament adorned with 4 cylindrical silver beads that fastens to a loop around the collarbone region. White Zetsu whistled in awe. Naruto always did like black. "I'm guessing those silver ornaments are your special seals for your cloak," spoke Zetsu as he kept examining the cloak, and he had to say Naruto had style and class. "Correct, Zetsu." Naruto pointed to the chain around his collarbone. "This seal suppresses my chakra voluntarily, making me appear as if I was a civilian. Only the Byakugan would be able to measure the chakra, and even then, they can only get so much from their eyes." He then pointed to the right-hand drawstring. "This seal is equipped with a barrier. Should any jutsu or weapon be aimed for the kill, a barrier would appear and prevent the attack from killing me. However, this seal is usable once per day, so I still have to avoid taking any fatal shots from kunai." He then pointed to the left drawstring. "This seal frees me from all movement impairing restriction, and can also nullify a person's senses by producing an invisible shockwave, therefore making them full unconscious, and also has the same time limit as the barrier." Zetsu nodded at the ingenuity of Naruto's seals, and both were powerful and useful to many shinobis who would want to use it. At that moment Konan walked in, and found Zetsu and Ryu talking, and she also noticed and inspected Ryu's new cloth, and she had to say, the guy had style. "Are you heading off somewhere?" asked Konan with her eyes raised. "I have some errands to run. I will be leaving for a few hours, and until I return you are to stay here, and carry out any other missions the Mizukage has for us," ordered Ryu with deep authority. Konan's raised her blue eyebrow in curiosity. "Can't you just use whatever you used to get to the Land of Lightning and stay at the Land of Water at the same time?" suggested Konan. She was still curious about how that incident happened, and she knew they weren't shadow clones, they would be too far away from the original. "This is something I must do myself, besides it might be amusing for me," said Ryu with a well-hidden dark grin. Zetsu melted into the ground, and Ryu and Konan walked out of the hotel room out on the street. When both Akatsuki members were out on the street, Konan was watching the back of Naruto's new cloak, while Naruto himself had yet to move. The Sharingan wielder voiced what was on his mind. "I'm aware that you don't fully trust me. I can feel your doubt radiating off you like a light," spoke Naruto, surprising Konan. "Although you trust me more than Obito, the fake me, you can doubt me. I don't care, but if you want to help me kill Obito, you have to trust me." Konan didn't say anything except she stared at Ryu's back as he was walking away from her. Ryu pulled up the hood of his cloak. The only part of his face that wasn't obscured were his nose, mouth and chin. "Good day, Konan," was Ryu's last words as he disappeared in a cloud of bats. Konan listened as the flying mammals surrounded her, and she noticed that instead of deep black eyes, that bats are known to have each had a pair of blood-red Sharingan. Their high-pitched squeaks and the flapping of wings echoed around Konan as she watched as the bats flew away to some unknown location in the west. Itachi Uchiha was sitting down in a forest. It appeared as if he was meditating, but his thoughts were preoccupied with the newest member of the Akatsuki, Ryu Yakuza. The former Uchiha heir couldn't place his finger on it. There was just something that made him feel odd, as if he knew who Ryu Yakuza was, but yet he didn't know him at the same time. But what unnerved Itachi was that appeared as if Ryu was emotionless, literally, and the way he threatened Hidan. Itachi could tell that was false rage, so Ryu said that to emphasize his false rage. And the fact that Ryu had the Sharingan. But the Uchiha corpses left over by the massacre were burned so nobody would get the Sharingan. But then a thought came to Itachi. He had suspected that Naruto was alive for years, but that suspicion dwindled as the years flew by. But was Naruto Ryu? The legacy of the Yellow Flash was possible still alive, and was now among the organization that originally tried to kill him. But the question still remained, how is Naruto alive, and how did he get as strong? Itachi believed, as having the title of S-rank criminal meant they had power, lots of it. Could it have been the masked man that brought Naruto back and trained him, the masked man that helped him massacre the Uchiha? Itachi saw his partner Kasame walking over to him. And both partners walked on the road to their next mission, and Itachi cancelled his thought on the masked man and Ryu. Sakura Haruno was sitting in her room ready for the announcement that her tutor, the Hokage, Tsunade Senju, was going to make. The pink-haired girl was told nothing about what the announcement was, only that it was urgent since Tsunade had called the entire village. But something told Sakura, in her heart, that it had to do with Naruto. She couldn't explain it, she just felt that it was about Naruto. And even after 2 years the pain of losing him was still gripping her being. Sometimes she would wake up from her sleep chanting his name, and the only place she could see him was in her dreams. And what she did in those dreams, she could only wish they were real. But every time she woke from the dream, the cold feeling would wash over her. Getting off her bed and checking herself in the mirror, Sakura had noted that she had changed quite a lot. Gone was the obsessed and delusional girl. She was now replaced by a confidant and determined woman with a hint of stubbornness. She believed in her mind that she was a strong kunoichi, and it turned out she had a natural affinity towards medical ninjutsu, which turned out she was like a fish in water, as if she was born to perform medical ninjutsu. She opened her window that led to her balcony, and made her way to the Hokage Tower, where Tsunade was going to announce the news. Konoha appeared as if it was dreary, as if the life from the village had left the world along with Naruto. The clouds were starting to turn black, and a few drops of rain were felt by the villagers as they gathered in front of the Hokage Tower. None of the occupants in the village noticed a cloud of bats circling around in the gray sky. The flying rodents just circled around an electrical pole like vultures who had discovered a corpse. Then too the bats started bombing each other in a kamikaze-like way. And from their bodies a figure was starting to take shape as more bats collided with each other. And the figure emerged shrouded by black mist, and landed on the electrical pole gracefully. The figure was wearing a black cloak with black gloves, and his hood was up obscuring most of his face, except for his nose, mouth and chin. "This place hasn't changed at all, it's still repugnant as ever," spoke Naruto as he surveyed the village with his blood-red eyes. "I never thought I would return here, but I really want to see the reaction from the villagers. I want to see if they hate me even more, or will kiss my grave in gratitude and greed or possibly pity." The wind blew his coat violently, and some strands of his hair blew little. He scoured among the horde of people looking for anybody that he could recognize. However, watching the people's reaction was not the only reason he was here. He was going to do something he never got to do when he last visited. And luckily the detection barrier around the village thought he was a civilian with his new Fuinjutsu enhanced cloak. He was able to spot some people he could recognize, such as 2 idiots wearing green jumpsuits and terrible haircuts. A fair-looking boy with a large white dog and red fang tattoos on his cheeks. He remembered that this certain individual lacked any real intelligence. A fat boy with long brown hair and swirls on his cheeks. He was really sensitive and couldn't control his emotions when angered by his weight. A red-eyed and dark-haired woman who was quite masterful at genjutsu. He really couldn't recall anything about her other than calling him weak. A dark blue-haired girl with white eyes and jacket. He could remember that this girl lacked any real courage or special abilities. And many others. How he wanted to make them suffer and have them see who was weak compared to him. Anyone who scorned him shall know grief. But there was one person that made him pause in his search. It was a pink-haired girl wearing a red vest, and her headband was worn to keep her hair together. He could remember something from this girl as if he was attracted to her, but all he could remember was her looking down on him and thinking herself superior to him. He sat down on the electrical pole, and pressed his fist against his cheek, lazily holding up his head, and he had one leg drawn up against his chest, where his other rested on his knee. "Show me if the will of fire still lives," whispered Naruto. Down among the crowds, Sakura heard something among the muttering and arguments of the civilians, as if a whisper from the ghost. She remembered each word perfectly. "Show me if the will of fire still lives." She turned her head in multiple directions looking for the source of the certain whisper, but she found nothing, but she could have sworn that the voice sounded familiar, and yet different at the same time. She could feel the small droplets of rain fall on her face. Luckily it wasn't a downpour, so most people wouldn't complain. But she also compared the weather to when he died. Did Naruto have such strong effect on the village? Did he cause the weather to change? Thinking nothing of it, Sakura turned her attention back toward the Hokage Tower. The moment of truth was at hand. Tsunade walked on top of the tower, and saw all the villagers who had come to hear the announcement. She could feel the swelling in her heart as if it was guilt. But she mustered up her courage and faced the crowds. "Here it comes," said Naruto as he watched Tsunade from his position. "People of Konohagakure," yelled Tsunade, silencing everyone, and all eyes turned on her. "Today as your Hokage I will announce something that has been known only to the elders of the leaf for 15 years. Her boisterous voice was heard throughout the hidden village. Naruto had to compliment her. She truly was a capable leader. This news goes back to the Kyuubi attack, where the Yondaime Hokage sacrificed himself to kill the beast, continued Swand. But this is false. The Yondaime couldn't kill the beast. No one can kill a Biju, so the Yondaime sealed the malevolent fox spirit into the body of a baby who was born barely a few hours ago. Many people of the crowd started muttering amongst themselves. "Baby? More like sacrifice," said Naruto scornfully as his eyes narrowed, while he watched the Go-Daime. This child's name was Naruto Uzumaki. Many of Naruto's classmates gasped. Their classmate was the jailer of the fox that nearly destroyed their village. Many of the younger generations gasped themselves, but they started having thoughts that barely a baby this Naruto Uzumaki saved them. While the older generation scowled, and many started chanting that the demon deserved to die. Amusing, shouldn't it be the older generations who are wiser than their youngers? It seems children possess more intelligence than others who have double their experience in life, spoke Naruto as his eyes gauged the reaction from the children. Naruto kept his empty eyes upon the Hokage, his ears picking up every word spoken among the civilians. However, what most people don't know is that our Yondaime died with a legacy he left to all of you, said Tsunade as she continued her speech. He died leaving the world his greatest treasure, his son, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Even more gasps were heard as many in the crowd started changing their opinions of him so quickly. Naruto snorted. It didn't take long for the people to come to their senses. And it wasn't that hard to figure out that he was the Yondaime's son. The resemblance between the two was extremely uncanny. Jinchuriki are usually chosen out from their respective Kage's own family so, to decrease the chance of the host abandoning their village. The Yondaime was far too noble a person to ask someone else's child to be the jailer, so he used his own blood, his kin, someone worth more to him than Konoha itself, continued Tsunade. And at that moment not a sound resounded in the leaf. Guilt, disappointment and sorrow was what was felt among the people, but one sorrow darkened all others, and that was Sakura's sorrow. Her head was down and there were tears trailing down from her emerald eyes. She was crying, because she too had a part in Naruto's suffering. While others in the crowd were shouting that everything their leader said was false and that it was impossible for the demon to be the child of the Yondaime. Their anger was palpable, that Naruto could feel it even outside the village. His last wish, the Yondaime's last wish, was that his son would be treated as a hero for housing the beast within his own body, protecting you and your families with every breath he took. But you let your hatred blind you to the truth, exclaimed Tsunade. Everyone were at a loss and were openly crying. They had seen the resemblance, but they refused to see it. Others were roaring in denial, believing that no demon could be born from a Kage. When you pour water into a cup, does the cup become water? No, it's just a cup with water in it, said Naruto to himself as he watched the reactions. Many were chanting among themselves about how they failed the Yondaime and the Sandaime. We failed the Yondaime, we're monsters. How could we do this, to a child no less? If only I can take back what I did. Or many of the sentences that spread amongst the villagers like fire. Naruto scoffed in disgust, but Yuri was amused at the same time. Disgusted at how they believe they can take back what they did to him, and all the times they beat him and threw rocks at him. He just wanted to kill himself to spare himself from all the hatred and anger that was directed towards him every day, and amused because the way the civilians were acting was the most likely result. You lived in fear of something that shouldn't be feared. Every one of you contributed to his pain and anguish, and you only strengthened his sorrow. He wanted to prove to every one of you that he was more than what you claimed he was. You denied him everything he needed for your petty revenge, and I was going to choose him to be Hokage after me, for he had shown everything a Hokage must be, and because he had something that all of you had forsaken, the will of fire, bellowed Tsunade. The legendary ideal of the Shodaime Hokage. An ideal that Naruto had adhered to every day. But you betrayed my grandfather, and you betrayed all the other Hokage before me. And now that pure-hearted boy is dead, and you praise and worship his killer, someone who had abandoned the village for power, and ran to someone worse than the Kyuubi. Shouted Tsunade, who now had visible tears streaking across her face. It's funny how they celebrate the death of a child as if a miracle had happened. Snorted Naruto. He never asked to be a Jinchuriki, he never asked to be despised, as if he was dirt, no worse than dirt, as if he was nothing. He tried to change your views of him. He wanted all of you to look at him, as if he mattered to the village. He wanted to be your leader, your next Hokage. Because he loved this village more than anything, he would have sacrificed everything for you. The amount of courage he'd shown outweighed all the value of gold in this world. He was the embodiment of the will of fire, its physical manifestation. Continued Tsunade, and the villagers were wallowing in sorrow for all the things the Godayume had said was true. If one to look closely, you could Iruka forcing his way through, crying all the way, for he too had been responsible for some of Naruto's suffering. Naruto's eyes were still watching emotionlessly, while his features revealed something different. He had a sickly grin marring his features as his fists clenched in excitement. He wanted so much just to kill everyone in this village, but he had better things to do, and he was going to send a warning. I think I've said enough, spoke Tsunade as she wiped away her tears. And with that all the villagers left, sad tidings and depression filling their hearts. Except for Naruto, who lost his grin, going back to his usual neutral state. And then he felt something impact against his cloak's hood, and when he looked up he felt raindrops hit his face. He had to compliment the weather, it matched how the people were feeling perfectly. He stood up and dusted off his cloak, and disappeared within cloud of bats. The flying rodents flew to a certain area. The blonde had to pay his respects to a certain someone. However, Naruto was unaware of a pair of white eyes watching him from down below. A pair that belonged to the supposed prodigy of the Hyuga had at the corners of his eyes observed a person in a black coat. He knew that person wasn't of the Akatsuki since his cloak lacked black clouds, but there was something off about that person. He was going to tail him, and he would have to tell this to a select group of people, Shikamaru being at the top of the list. Later that rainy day, all the Rookie 9 and Team Guy gathered at a Korean barbecue restaurant. Their subject of their gathering: Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I can't believe Naruto was the son of the Yondaime, the greatest hero of the village, commented Kiba, whose hands were behind his head as he looked up at the roof. He received a bark from Akamaru in agreement. There was food for each person at the table they were sitting at, however no one had touched their food or even looked at it. I know, it's just so shocking. He was the dead last, so there was no way he could have been the son of the Yondaime, said Ino, who was sitting next to Sakura, whose head was bowed, and a melancholy expression on her face. Shikamaru always knew that despite how Naruto was perceived to be the dead last, the young Nara could instantly see massive potential in him. Shikamaru caught Neji staring at him seriously, as if wanting to say something, but couldn't, the reason being Ino, the gossip queen. Yurei-sama was the dead last of his academy days, and he's now the most powerful member amongst the Sannin, commented Shino blankly. Tenta nodded her head at the bug user, same with Choji. It's so unyouthful how people treated him. They had nothing to fear. The most youthful Yondaime was a master at sealing, so of course he knew how to contain the beasts properly, responded Lee. Naruto-kun was always sad, it's just nobody could see it, stuttered Hinata. But, to go through something like that, the entire village hating him for something out of his control, to bear what that requires, spoke Choji, who was slightly depressed. An amazing amount of courage and fortitude, said Neji, finishing Choji's sentence, and the Hyuga prodigy had yet to take his white eyes of Shikamaru. Could we have lasted in Naruto's shoes, asked Tenten. Many of the others shook their heads at this question. It's too late now, Naruto's dead, there's no way to bring him back, he deserved better, we were his friends and comrades, and were we there for him, when he needed us most? Because he was there for us, uttered Shikamaru. And everyone nodded at him because it was true, Naruto would help any one of them in a heartbeat. He never had what he had, a family, that's all he ever truly wanted, and we could have given him that, because we were his friends. The only person who had yet to say anything was Sakura. She held her arms tightly so to not break down crying in front of her friends. She could never claim to understand Naruto's feelings, she couldn't empathize with him. Sakura got up from her seat and left the room, so nobody could see the tears that were spiraling down her face. She loved the blonde knucklehead. To hear of his suffering was like a knife was driven through her heart. She needed to be away from everyone. The cloud of bats flew across the village, their squeaks and flapping reverberated the air, and their showering and piercing the atmosphere. The flying mammals saw a familiar sight, and they descended from their safety in the sky, and they dive-bombed each other again and again, as a black figure appeared on soft grass, as his feet lightly came in contact with the green floor. Naruto's back cloud form dispersed, and he found himself within the Konoha cemetery. He had come to pay his respects to only one person. No one else mattered to him. He walked slowly among the headstones, his body on autopilot. He paid little heed to the tombs, except for a specific one among them. His cloak's tails were scraping the ground, and the heels of his shoes were leaving impressions in the grass. The rain was still pelting the cloaked person as he made his way to an all-too-familiar headstone. And he beheld as he stood before the tombstone of Naruto Uzumaki. He inspected every word written on the carved stone as scorned hero. He never became the fire's shadow. Naruto just stared at the words. This was most likely the civilian's handiwork, condemning him even in death. He rubbed away the dead flower petals that decorated the headstone. It's been a long time, old friend. I can't count the number of years it has been since I last felt your presence. Started Naruto talking to his grave. You were just a mask which melted with its wear, and you believed that your friend is worthy of redemption, and your promise to that pink-haired girl was empty and hollow. Scolded Naruto to the headstone of his psychological mask. He created that mask to shroud his pain and fool the villagers, but however after spending so much time with the mask it melted into his being until Naruto became the mask. But when he died the mask was shattered. But still the real Naruto referred to his old persona as his friend, because for a time he had believed that the people would accept him, and the mask would become the face. But it was not to be. The face and the mask were as different as the moon and the sun, but still they coexisted with each other. But now only the moon remained, which was lost without the sun's light. The mask and the face, despite having different personalities, were one and the same person. Whenever you chipped at the mask, the face would also feel the pain. Love is made of the negative emotions that shape us, same with hatred, but when we lose the positives and the negatives we are left as nothing but hollow beings, empty and devoid. Monologue Naruto. And he was right, without either a person would be barren. This is what happens when someone adheres to the will of fire, an ideal created by a fool and followed by idiots. He then felt the presence of someone's chakra coming in from behind him. He saw the same pink-haired girl from before, yet he couldn't remember her name. He recognized her face, but he couldn't remember her name. The trace memories he had of her were blurry, but he could remember that she was always angry at him for some reason. She walked up next to him and eyed the headstone. She was carrying a bouquet of white roses which were thoroughly drenched in water. And her hair was damp, and her eyes were overshadowed. She then looked at Naruto, who hadn't moved from his position. Have you come to spit on the demon's grave? Snarled Sakura while leaking a small amount of killing intent. Because she had heard many times in the past that people would go and spit on Naruto's grave. No, said Naruto. Just come to pay my respects to a friend, spoke Naruto as he bowed his head a little. Then Naruto turned heel and left, his black cloak draping behind him, protecting him from the rain. Sakura was surprised by this statement, and she watched as the retreating figure walked away. Wait, she called out, and the black figure who stopped in his stride and turned his head a little, but without exposing his face. Who are you? Naruto pondered the question, and when he thought about it this feeling would wash over him. It was uncertainty. Who was he? Was he Naruto Uzumaki, Ryu Yakuza, Madara Chihara? Was he nobody? Did he even have a face? When he grew up the villagers looked at him, as if he was nothing. They didn't care if he was a child or a Jinchuriki. He truly was nobody. Just an empty shell. I'm what's left. Or maybe, I'm all there ever was, spoke Naruto. And he felt like his statement rang true. As if he really was a shell filled with only hatred. Why are you here? I come here so I won't forget, answered Sakura softly as she looked back at Naruto's grave. Forget about what? Him? Memories is all I have of him, and I don't want to forget them, spoke Sakura. Naruto turned his body a little, almost facing her. He will never be a memory, spoke Naruto, surprising Sakura. Only a reminder. You're right, just because you can't remember someone doesn't mean they're gone, so long as they remain with you, in the place most valuable to a person, their heart, spoke Sakura softly with a small smile, not knowing that it wasn't what the cloaked man meant. He truly wished to see him again, spoke Naruto, referring to his mask again. I do, more than anything, I want to hold him, to watch him, to kiss him. Just being in his presence will be enough, said Sakura, pouring her heart out. But yet, he made a promise to me. Naruto was listening intently to the girl he knew but couldn't remember. It was a lie. That promise he made to me, he made it to obscure his own pain, and then to illuminate my happiness. And yet I know now that I was never his friend, sobbed Sakura. While Naruto narrowed his eyes, he still couldn't remember her. That was the main problem surrounding the Sharingan wielder. His memories fluctuated wildly. He could remember everything from his past life in a second, and then the next he could remember nothing. It frustrated him to no end, knowing that he couldn't remember, and this girl was frustrating. He knew her, and yet he didn't. Why was she so special? How come he could remember most of his acquaintances, and if he couldn't, it would only take a while for that certain memory to return and leave again? If you wanted to be his friend, you should have been his family, always there for him, when he needed them most. Spoke Naruto. But still, even family can betray you. And like Naruto, when we die, we return to the nothingness. Sakura bit her lip in confusion. She turned her head to look back at Naruto's grave, and then back at the man, but found that he was gone. However, she could hear loud screeching and flapping of wings. Shikamaru was playing shogi with his father Shikaku Nar. It was a pretty even match for the lazy geniuses. They were trying to outsmart each other, but it was useless because each were trying to predict each other's thought and moves before they even made it, which led to even more thinking about what move they will make after the move, so it was the longest game in shogi history. Why can't the writer of this story just choose who the winner of the game is, instead of going into detail about this troublesome game, troublesome writer? Spoke Shikamaru, calling out to the writer. Who knows, maybe he's trying to make the story more interesting for his loyal readers, by making us aware of his existence, and add on to the fact that something bad is going to happen, and it possibly involves you and some of your friends, troublesome author. Replied Shikaku as he hadn't made a move in 5 minutes even though it was his turn. And just then their mother and wife walked in saying that someone wanted to speak to Shikamaru. Shikamaru got off his seat and went to the door. Troublesome writer, hope he doesn't kill me off, muttered Shikamaru as he slumped to his door. And standing before him was Neji, who was soaked with liquid dropped by the clouds. We need to talk, Shikamaru. Spoke Neji seriously. Is the writer going to kill you off? Asked Shikamaru lazily. What? Responded Neji curiously with one eye narrowed and the other raised. Nothing, replied the Nar heir. There's someone in the village. I believe he's an intruder that snuck in, possibly an enemy ninja from a rival village, whispered Neji with a hint of seriousness. It's been barely 2 months since Ryu Yakuza snuck in and killed all those Anbu and nearly killed Kakashi-sensei, Kurenai-sensei and her team, so it's highly possible that someone else could have snuck in, but I heard from my dad that Ryu Yakuza is rumored to have joined the Akatsuki. So you may be right, Neji. Spoke Shikamaru, which surprised Neji at the number of words the Nara said, for he rarely ever uttered one word. We need to be careful. If the village found out we have been infiltrated again, it could cause a panic, and we should take some pressure of Hokage-sama's back by dealing with this ourselves. Neji nodded in agreement. We need a capable team to confront this person. Also, he may not be alone, he could have some allies with him. We need people trust, preferably people we have worked with and are on friendly terms, that way we would be familiar with their fighting styles. Spoke Neji. Shikamaru nodded in agreement. I'll gather the others, was Neji's final words, before he left to gather a team. So many memories came to him. He could remember everything about this place. He remembered when he cried from the villagers ignoring his existence, when he cursed the villagers in anger about why they hated him, how he dreamt of suicide while wallowing in despair, how he used to hide when fear took hold of him, and when he felt hatred, he just wanted to slaughter every one of them. Naruto stood outside his apartment, escaping the rain that poured over the village of Konoha. His apartment. Sarutobi had given it to him as a present when he was kicked out of the orphanage. He was too young to remember why, but now that he was older he understood perfectly. HS apartment wasn't a 5-star hotel, and it wasn't a shitty motel, it was just normal. It wasn't too small, and it wasn't too big, it was just right, although there were signs of decay and age such as the cracks in the walls and leaks in the plumbing, and the chipping of wood from the floor. It wasn't dirty, and it wasn't clean. He could remember all the ramen he used to devour, and the leftover cups he dropped on the floor. There were bugs and oozy smells radiating from his home, but there was always at least one pest in every household. He would search the house to bottom, searching for the cockroaches that nested within his clothes. He would sometimes spend hours searching for the insects, and then stomp on them with his boot. All in all, it was home. But now when he looked at his apartment, he couldn't remember ever looking like it was now. The door that led to his home was broken off its hinges, except for a single hinge which was barely holding the wooden rectangle. One touch and the door would fall. There was graffiti along the walls leading to his apartment. Go to hell, demon. Son of a whore. You should have died the day you were born. Should have killed yourself, fox brat. Uchiha-sama saved us. Those were the words that were painted on the walls. Also, Naruto couldn't sense any chakra signatures resonating from the building. It's as if the inhabitants just packed up and left. Maybe they left after they died, so the other inhabitants wouldn't come into contact with the demon's nest. Naruto walked up to the door and gently stepped over it. When on the other side he gripped the sides of his door and softly hefted it, breaking the hinge, and he positioned it like it should have been. When he turned around he saw the state the inside of his apartment was. The floors were burnt, and the wood was broken and holes caked the ground. Everything that was his was destroyed. His refrigerator was on the floor, and large chunks were missing from the machine. His bed was heavily burnt and its springs of the mattress were visible. And there was even more graffiti, saying even more hurtful things. There were glass shards scattered amongst the ruin, and the windows bore cracks and fractures in the windows and jagged edges as sharp as blades. Naruto took a step forward, and he heard something crack beneath his foot. When he looked down, he saw something. He bent down and brushed away some splintered wood, and he beheld a picture. Its glass was broken and the frame was cracked. But there was something about this picture. In the photo there were three people: a silver-haired, masked man, a dark-eyed, dark-haired boy, and blue-eyed blonde and a pink-haired girl who appeared to be giddy at the prospect of something. The masked man appeared to be smiling with his eye, while patting the heads of two of his students, the two boys. The dark-haired one was brooding and looking away from the camera, as if he had other stuff better to do than be there, while the blonde had his arms crossed and was scowling at said dark-haired boy in jealousy and aggravation. The girl, even now he couldn't remember why she was happy. From his eyes Naruto could tell that this girl would not last long in the shinobi world. Her body appeared weak, as if she was dieting, causing her muscles to be undeveloped, and her stamina near non-existent, and also he could tell that she was not from a clan, or a prestigious shinobi family, therefore her chakra levels would be barely slightly above civilian. All in all, she wouldn't last 10 seconds in the world on her own. But he also noted that this was the same girl from before, at his grave. How come he could remember every one of his classmates, teachers and friends, but not this girl? How come he couldn't remember her? His mask had known her, so that meant he must have met her or at least knew about her. But he could not recall anything other than her being furious at him and punching him in the jaw for some near unknown reason. While looking at the picture, Naruto could feel this longing feeling inside him. It made him melancholy just thinking about it. Or did he believe that he was sorrowful? He didn't know the answer. The black-cloaked blonde sat down on his ruined bed and kept looking at the picture. This was truly the only thing of value to him from his mask's life. Wait, no, there was something else. He looked to his right and saw an old Raymond poster above his bed, which was still connected to the wall unlike everything else. He discarded the photo, where it landed with the sound of glass breaking and the noise of tearing paper. He failed to notice that a piece of the photo had torn itself from the rest. The young blonde in the picture had been separated from the three others, while the remaining photo just remained the same, without the small blonde-haired boy. Naruto faced the Raymond poster and gripped the corner of the paper where he tore it off the wall. A part of the wall was carved out of the structure, and behind the poster was a small box. The box had a small combination lock protecting it from outside forces. Naruto twiddled away with the lock instead of breaking it with his fist. Why? Even he didn't know. 7, 28, 13, 4, 32, 9 thought Naruto as he remembered the combination for the lock. He heard a click and removed the lock, where he found numerous photos. He searched through the photos one after the other. There were mainly photos of his mask with his friends, teachers and family. His old self would have smiled at the heartwarming moments with Tsunade and Jiraiya, along with some of his friends and Sarutobi, his surrogate grandfather, and Iruka and Konohamaru. He never smiled at any of the photos, he was just empty. None of these photos made sense to him. He then came across a photo that made him pause. It was him, his mask and the pink-haired girls standing with their backs to the camera under a cherry blossom tree. He didn't know why this picture had caught his scrutiny. He didn't know many things that had happened between his training and his infamy. He decided not to ponder it for now, but the girl was not important. He threw the photos to the floor and walked out of his old apartment forever. He had a score to settle with someone. Marichio Omida was the meaning of the word sloth, as in lazy. He was tall and fat, and upon his finger were jewels from all the corners of the shinobi world. He wore elaborate kimonos made from the finest silk Konoha had to offer. His home was flowing with gold, emerald, sapphire, ruby and diamonds, pearls and platinum. Marichio was vain, cowardly, snobbish, greedy, sluggish and arrogant. He was a member of the Konoha Council and was a loyal supporter of Sasuke Uchiha. He even recommended that Sasuke have a statue erected in his honor. But the Hokage had slated Sasuke as a missing nin. Marichio and his supporters had tried many times to persuade the Hokage, Tsunade, but she was just as stubborn as her teacher, where instead of killing the demon she welcomed it, and even thought of that boy as a son. Marichio believed that the fox had tricked the mind of the Hokages. Obviously that was what a fox would do. He had tried many times to kill the demon by starving it by bribing the shopkeepers, who declined his money, saying that killing the demon is its own reward, which pleased the fat man to no end. But he has had a good life. The demon was dead, the village was safer than I have ever been, and no trouble had been caused aside from Ryu Yakuza. Marichio was a civilian councilman, one of the wealthiest men in the village, and he had a great family. His father was still around and kicking along with his mother, and he has 3 siblings, a brother and 2 sisters. Night had fallen over the village, and it was still raining. Marichio noted that it had rained more ever since the demon's death. However, not being a shinobi of course made him unaware of his surroundings, where he didn't see or notice a black-cloaked figure tailing him like a shadow who was literally walking behind him, their steps perfectly cinched so not to create a sound. This shadow had red eyes with 3 tomo in each iris, which were spinning rapidly. Marichio heard a sound behind him, and spun around, but was met with nothing but a cat eating out of a trash can. Marichio huffed at the creature, and restarted his trek back to his mansion. while the figure in black was watching from the rooftops, his black cloak whipping in the wind and drenched by the rain, and his red malevolent eyes were burning with intense rage that any body could cut the palpable anger that filled the air. When the fat councilman saw his home not too far away, he sighed in happiness. However, he was blissfully unaware of the tragedy inside and a dark hatred lurking within. Marechio walked in and saw his mother making dinner in the kitchen. "Hey Ka-san," called out Marechio. His mother turned around and smiled at him. "Hello, Marechio," said his mother softly. "What's for dinner?" said Marechio excitedly. "Ramen," answered his mother, which made Marechio face fold. "Ka-san, you know I hate ramen. I should have closed down that stand of ramen cooks long ago for serving the demon," spat Marechio. Apparently, even after the great announcement, he still believed that a boy, the son of a hero, was still the demon. "I'm sorry honey, maybe you should have something else," suggested his mother. But before the councilman could answer her, his little sister Moreo Amita came running up to him and gave him a large hug. "Ni-san, you're home," cried Moreo in happiness. "Hello Moreo, were you good for Ka-san?" asked Marechio as he got down on his knees to become eye to eye with his sister. Moreo nodded her head at her brother, who patted her hair gently. "Also Marechio, a friend of yours came by earlier. He's waiting for you in your office," said Marechio's mother. "Really? Who is it?" questioned Marechio with a raised eyebrow. "He didn't say other than he's an old friend of yours," replied the Amita matriarch. "Well, I do like old friends," said Marechio as he scratched his chin. "Cool, see you Ka-san." Marechio was quite cheerful about the prospect of seeing an old friend again. He cherished the moments when he would hang out with his friends, which were few in number, and they too were also on the council. When the Amita reached his office, he saw the person his mother was talking about sitting in his chair. His hand was clenched into a fist and idly holding up his head, and his leg was crossed over the other, as if showing signs of authority. The chair was made of leather and sewn to perfection, and it took days for it to be made. He was currently scrutinizing a painting of Amita being hefted to the heavens by angels, and he was naked in the painting. The painting was directly behind the desk, which was one of many things that occupied many other items and doodads in the office. The office itself was dark except for a small light coming from the office's fireplace, which was located within a wall on the side away from the desk. Marechio also noticed that the man had his hood up obscuring his face, except for his mouth, chin and nose. "Hello," greeted Marechio nervously. He hadn't expected someone like this to arrive. His friends usually wore only the best attire, and what this man was wearing could have been forged by a peasant to Marechio, Kage to a shinobi. "Hello, Marechio," spoke the unknown man who hadn't moved a muscle. "Interesting painting, it matches your gluttony perfectly." Marechio didn't know if he should be insulted or complimented. Who are you?" asked the fat man wearily. The figure turned his head slightly. "Come now, don't you remember me? We've known each other for quite a long time," said the shadow as he stood up from the chair. Do I know you?" asked the Amita head as his shoulders slumped. The black cloak man's assumptions about the councilman proved to be true. He really was dumb. "Allow me to enlighten your memory," said the man as he withdrew his hood. The first thing Marechio noted was that the man was extremely handsome, even more handsome than he is. He had sun-kissed blonde hair which was patterned into a low ponytail that went down between his shoulder blades, which was currently resting on his shoulder. At least half of the ponytail was wrapped in bandages, and he had strands of hair framing the sides of his face that went down to his chin, and a few strands that fell between his eyes, which were narrow and slightly round, and his face was narrow with a defined jawline. But his eyes were the most frightening thing about him. They were a pair of Sharingan, the blood-red eyes of the cursed and near-extinct Uchiha clan. Marechio knew he had seen this man before, but he just couldn't remember where. "Ayandari Hokage, you've returned from the dead," praised Amita. But he was obviously not put off by the dead eyes staring at him. "Wrong, think again, a little harder this time," said the figure. And Marechio did just that. Okay, blonde, wait, the only other person who had that shade of blonde was his, thought Amita before it came to him. He knew who this person was. You're the demon," yelled Marechio as he pointed a finger at Naruto and fell on his behind, and started scurrying away as best he could. Naruto started clapping at the man. Despite his low intelligence, he was able to figure out something that no one else could. "Congratulations, you should be proud. One in the elemental nations has figured out my identity so quickly. However, you are mistaken about one thing," spoke Naruto with a small smirk. "I'm no demon, I'm a dragon. Also, I left a gift for you downstairs," said Naruto as he pointed to the door leading out of the office. With that, Marechio ran out the room, leaving a pungent stench which irritated Naruto. Did he have to piss himself? Marechio ran as fast as his fat, flabby legs could carry him, Naruto walking in a brisk pace after him. And when Marechio arrived at the kitchen, he found the entire floor saturated in blood, and there lay the corpses of his family, his mother and brother along with his oldest sister. They were dead, their bodies were cold, and their skin was ashen pale, while their eyes were wide and cloudy. "How? It's impossible, I only talked to them a few minutes ago," said Marichio as his mind was trying to comprehend everything it was receiving. The wonders of Genjutsu, of course you would know nothing about it since you being a fool, spoke Naruto aloofly. He turned around and saw Naruto standing behind him with a small smirk. Marichio hurried into another room, leaving Naruto alone in the large kitchen. When the councilman came out, he was holding an oversized spike ball which was larger than his head, and it appeared to be heavy to lift. Naruto observed that there were tears trailing down from Marichio's eyes with a hint of anger but mostly sorrow. I will use my family's legendary weapon, the invincible flail that's been passed down from generation to generation. With this ball I'm basically invincible, roared Amida. Let's crush the demon, Jujutsuburi. Marichio charged at Naruto, who was unafraid of the human hippopotamus. But Marichio tripped over his own feet, and his face smashed against the spike ball, breaking his nose and dislodging several teeth. Oh, you're stronger than I anticipated. If you were able to make me trip over with your mind, accused Marichio. But Naruto sighed. This man tripped over his own feet, because he couldn't keep his clumsiness in check. Maybe I should cut out your tongue instead of your heart, your ramblings are giving me a headache, complained Naruto. The blonde strolled up, and gripped the large ball with one of his hands, and threw it away, as if it was a beach ball, where it tore through the walls of the mansion easily. Maybe killing all your family wasn't enough, perhaps this will cause you to know suffering, spoke Naruto as he gathered chakra into his left eye. Tsukuyomi. Michio was transported to a red world with black clouds. Then Naruto appeared. As of now I will force you to watch as I slaughter your family again and again for 5 days, starting now, spoke Naruto as a katana manifested in his hand and Marichio's family also appeared. She slashed through Marichio's sister's skull. No, yelled Marichio as he watched his family slaughtered before him. And they disappeared, as if they were ghosts with Naruto standing before him with the same katana. What's wrong? We only have 4 days, 23 hours and 59 minutes left, stated Naruto as if nothing bothered him. And Marichio's family appeared again and again as he watched Naruto butcher the ones closest to him. Again and again Marichio watched as his family appeared, and they were brutally murdered in various and cruel ways. He cried, he called out for Naruto to stop, but it was no use, the blonde wouldn't listen, he just kept killing his family again and again. Marichio found himself in the real world suddenly, and he dropped to the floor crying and screaming, saliva dripping from his mouth along with a bit of froth on the corners of his lips. However, he was still able to maintain consciousness, which was rather impressive for a non-shinobi. I was certain that would cause you to go brain dead, but it seems your stupidity saved you by creating a psychological wall within Tsukuyomi, spoke Naruto. Well, I guess that I just have to break down that wall. Marichio looked up and saw a person floating beside Naruto, whoever it was wrapped in translucent ribbons which unwrapped to reveal his little sister Moreo. Moreo, gasped Marichio. In terms of physical resemblance, you two look nothing alike, however I can sense her chakra's signature is 67% similar to your own. She's your relative, no doubt. I wonder what you would do if I did this, said Naruto as he unsealed the Tamajiri no Tsurugi from the seal on his right wrist. He brought up the sword inches away from her neck, never moving his position other than his arm. He slowly brought the blade against her neck, and as Naruto knew, the blade doesn't even have to touch you to cut you. Marichio, gasped Moreo. A large slash-like trail of blood started to spout out of Moreo's neck, which only bled more as the blade grew closer. The slash kept growing larger and kept cutting through her neck where it was about halfway. Marichio watched in horror as the dragon was slowly killing his sister before his eyes. Time seemed to stop for the fat man as his sister's head crashed to the ground, and her lifeless remains flopped to the floor like a fish. Naruto picked up the head and threw it at Marichio, who sputtered around at the sight of his sister's head. Trust me, your family is not the first council family I've murdered this night, announced Naruto as he drew the Amida's attention. The Torabashi family and the Iba family have all met the same end. Why you're killing the councilors and their families, stated Marichio as he kept staring at his sister's bodiless head. Why yes, the ones who wronged me, the ones who denied me a right to live, the 3 other councilors that could tolerate my presence in the village will be spared, at least they never did anything to me, continued Naruto. Marichio started having flashbacks, when he would see Naruto as a young boy proclaiming he would be Hokage, and the number of times he had been summoned to the council chambers without the Hokage in the room at the time. The boy at the time was too ignorant, he didn't know why he was summoned, or who summoned him. And each time Amida and his supporters would try to undermine the Hokage's authority. However, the elders of the village were a thorn. They kept Naruto alive, because they knew how valuable he was, especially Danzo. He would keep an eye on the boy with his root soldiers, making sure he wouldn't die. Amida did what any person like him would do. He of course ran, hoping to get away from Naruto, while Naruto himself walked out of the mansion. He tried to get away, he was still crying even now. His psychological trauma was taking its toll as he could no longer think straight. He tripped over again, and his face smashed against the concrete, breaking even more of his nose. He felt an extreme pain coming from his right knee, and saw a metal dart connected by a thin string which was being held in Naruto's left hand. while Naruto was slowly strolling up to him, the Tamajiri still in hand. Naruto started tugging the thin string, pulling Marichio to him, while the man himself was clawing at the ground where the tips of his fingernails started bleeding from the trauma. When Naruto finally caught up to the man, he didn't run very far to begin with. He used his foot to position him on his back, and now held the Tamajiri in a reverse sword grip. He held the katana with both hands, and aimed it ready to stab Amida through the skull, who was still crying. "Please spare me," pleaded the pig, ready to be slaughtered. But Naruto didn't listen as he thrusted the Tamajiri through the man's mouth without restriction, killing him and blood pooling all around him, mixing with the water left by the rain. "My vengeance was fun while it lasted," spoke Naruto as he hefted the sword and sealed the katana into his wrist seals. He pulled up his hood, obscuring his eyes, and left on his merry way. The blonde infiltrator was strutting down the streets of his once home village. He took in every crevice and building. Every time his feet touched the ground, it made a loud squelching sound as a result of the muddy water. Then he saw a familiar building in sight, one where he found sanctuary and solace. Ichiraku ramen was open. Although he had some ramen in his training days, he never had a full-on bowl of his once favorite meal. His decision came in the form of his stomach growling a little. He sighed and made his way to the ramen joint, and sat down in his once usual spot. He could remember faintly all the times he came to the store when he was sad, happy or angry, and usually a bowl of ramen would quench his emotion at the time. He found the young ramen cooks working away at their noodles and soup. They would notice him eventually, so there was no point in calling out to them. When Aim turned around, she saw a black-clad man in one of their stools. "Hello, welcome to Ichiraku ramen," greeted the cook. "Hello, may I have some miso ramen with servings of pork, please?" asked Naruto. Aim nodded at him, and told her father the order. Tucci also looked at the man. "Terrible weather we're having," commented Tucci as he peered out of his shop. "I like the rain, it's very soothing in content," replied Naruto. "It's been like this ever since." But he trailed off, hoping to not remember that sad time. "Never mind, so what brings a stranger like you to Konoha?" asked Tucci, whose frown was replaced with a grin. "Meeting with old friends," answered Naruto. Tucci nodded and decided not to press into it, thinking it was personal. "Order up," said Aim as she placed a bowl of steaming ramen in front of Naruto, who broke the chopsticks and helped himself to the noodles. He noted that nothing had changed about the ramen. It was as great as ever. He could only wish he had the recipe, so he can make some for himself. Naruto paid for the meal, and was about to leave the store, when something caught his eye. It was a menu on the inside wall of the store, and on the menu in bold letters was Naruto ramen. He raised his eyebrow in intrigue. Tucci and Aim caught Naruto staring at their deluxe special ramen. They made that ramen recipe into honor Naruto and his sacrifice to the village, although it wasn't very popular, most likely from the civilians' hatred towards him. Naruto kept staring at the menu, before he left, muttering a thank you to the ramen cooks. Pitter-pattering was heard throughout the village, and the squelching of shoes meeting the wet ground. Naruto was leaving. He had enough of this place, but the pink-haired girl was still frustrating. He could remember her, and forget her at the same time. What was so special about her? However, Naruto knew he was being followed. He could feel their nervousness and their fear. They had been tailing him for the past hour. He stopped in his track. When he came face to face with Neji Hyuga, the prodigy of the Hyuga clan was barring his way on the large road leading out of the village. He could feel the memory of him defeating the Hyuga, and he defeated him with taijutsu and a single ninjutsu. He mused to himself upon how pathetic it was for a member of the powerful Hyuga clan being defeated by a single jutsu. "Stop where you are," called out Neji. But Naruto remained silent. Then all the others came out of their hiding, and stood to the sides of Neji. Shinobume, Shikamaru Nar, Rock Lee, Kiba Inuzuka and his partner Akamaru and Tenten. They were all facing Naruto and all looked ready for combat. "He's the only one here. He doesn't have any friends lurking around," spoke Tenten. "Cool. Then this guy should be a piece of cake. He's all alone," said Kiba with confidence, arrogance in Naruto's mind. "Don't underestimate him, Kiba." "Why?" "Because we know nothing of his abilities, so what you should do is overestimate him," reprimanded Shino in his dull voice. "What's your name?" "Troublesome," muttered Shikamaru, which was loud enough to hear. "My name is of no importance. You're blocking my path, and I would like to leave the village," spoke Naruto. He really didn't want to deal with pests at the moment, but he could stick around for a while. Tenten took out a kunai and threw it aimed for Naruto's head, but the Sharingan wielder caught it with his index finger through the ring of the blade. "No way," thought Tenten, who among the six, excluding Akamaru, had the best aim and trajectory. And with one finger Naruto returned the kunai by throwing it aimed for Tenten's eye. He was able to dodge out of the way, but not without some damage, in the form of one of her buns being cut. "It seems that I wouldn't be able to leave as I planned, but I guess I can dance with you for a while," spoke Naruto. "Besides, this is the perfect opportunity to try out something new." All six members readied themselves for battle. Naruto brought up his arms and unsealed two identical metal sais, the weapons not the character. The shaft and prongs on the side were made of silver chakra conductive metal, and the grip was black, with gold bands wrapping around it, and topping it off with yellow cloth sprouting from the hilt. Sais are mainly used for bashing the opponent with quick and powerful thrusts, along with slashes like a sword, and stabbing like a knife. Informed Tenten because ninja don't usually use sais. From the rain and thunder in the sky along with their clothes which are drenched with water, lightning release will be the most effective in this environment. Studied Naruto as he took account of his surroundings. Water conducts electricity, and since it was natural, any lightning release technique would be amplified. Plus he wanted to have some fun, so he was going to hold back against them. He then channeled lightning chakra through his sais, giving it an increase in sharpness, and taking away the need to bash an opponent, and also giving the added benefit of inducing numbness, since most of the fighters were close range minus Shikamaru and Shino. Okay, never mind, said Kiba as he prepared to fight. Neji activated his Byakugan, and observed his opponent's chakra. It was about mid-Kage level, and the signature was familiar and different at the same time. It's like Neji had seen this chakra before, but it was so different that he couldn't recognize it. But technically the cloaked man had more than simple Kage level reserves. But before we begin, said Naruto as he sealed his left sai and formed a single hand seal. Where seal arrays appeared on 4 buildings around them, that was about 1.5 square miles. Eyes of a silencing seal. It causes anything trapped within the arrays to be silenced, except for the inside. While we're in here no one can hear us, shouted Tenten to her comrades who frowned at the news. The cloaked man was expecting them the whole time. Let's get started, roared Kiba as he and Akamaru took off at Naruto. Kasuga, yelled Kiba as he and his Ninken surged toward Naruto, who backflipped away from the Fang and Claw Cyclone. Kiba gritted his teeth at the guy. That was one of his fastest techniques, and the man easily dodged him. Naruto took a defensive stance with sais with their shafts facing towards him, and the handles facing away. Neji and Lee charged forward intending to take advantage of their years of teamwork. Neji aimed a Juken shot at Naruto's arm, but Naruto used his speed to redirect with simple movements of his sais, and blocked Lee's kick aimed for his head with his other weapon. Neji aimed for a double Juken tap the chest, but Naruto strafed by him, and tried to cut his arm with his lightning sais. But interference from Shikamaru's shadow paralysis jutsu forced him back. Naruto could remember that Shikamaru was a deadly opponent if you got caught in his shadow, and if he was, Naruto would be easy prey for the rest of them. However, from his memories he could remember that Naru techniques require light, and here wasn't much of it aside from the dimly lit street lamps. With his Sharingan, Naruto analyzed what appeared to be small lights floating around. Upon further inspection, Naruto saw that they were fireflies, a lot of fireflies, since one bug wouldn't be enough light for Shikamaru, and of course someone who specializes in bugs would be Shino. Deciding that Shikamaru and Shino were the most dangerous out of all of them, Naruto targeted them first. The cloaked blonde ran past Neji and Lee and strafed away from Kiba, and aimed one of his sais to stab Shikamaru, who was crouched down on the ground, having his shadow chase after Naruto. Naruto saw a small glint to his left and blocked it with his lightning sai, and to see that it was Tenten who was throwing kunai and shuriken at him. To Naruto the projectiles were moving slow, therefore making it easy for him to deflect and black. Konoha Senpu, yelled an annoying voice, and he saw Lee flying towards him aiming a kick at his temple, but Naruto blocked that with only little time as he spun around to Lee's backside and stabbed him in the back with his sai. Lee yelled out in pain as he felt the point of impact becoming numb from the lightning. Naruto swept his foot under Lee, causing the green-clad boy to fall, where Naruto was ready to stab him in the neck. But in a span of a few seconds Naruto heard a voice. Akikkshm, yelled Neji as he fired a vacuum shell at Naruto, who was blasted away a few feet but was relatively unharmed. Neji had to use about half the required chakra, because he wasn't fast enough to kill Naruto and save Lee at the same time. Naruto smirked, holding back on these guys turned out to be fun. Tenten jumped over to her teammate, and checked him over. Lee, you okay? I'm fine, Tenten, he didn't pierce me that deeply, but I'm a bit numb, answered Lee. I wouldn't take any breaks if I were you, warned Naruto, who none of them had figured out it was him. He sealed his sais, and went through some hand seals. Lightning release, falling lightning spears, yelled Naruto as multiple bursts of lightning fell from the sky trying to hit the six-leaf nin. Neji, seeing the lightning falling, was doing his best to avoid the electrical spears. Tenten and Lee were not as lucky, where the lightning was just scraping against them and numbing their bodies, where unfortunately because of their water-soaked bodies, the lightning traveled around their bodies, electrocuting them. Shino was able to create a shell of beetles surrounding him, and Shikamaru, but the bugs could only hold out against the lightning because of the intense heat, so he kept having to make the shell smaller and smaller with layers of insects. While Kiba and his partner were dodging the spears with their canine reflexes. Eventually the lightning stopped and Naruto went on the offensive, slipping into an offensive stance with the shafts of his sais positioned for stabbing and cutting. He threw one of his sais at Shino's bug shield, which had a rope of lightning connected to it, where it penetrated through the shield, and he pulled himself towards the bug bunker by using the lightning rope connected to his sai. He burst through the shield ready to kill Shino and Shikamaru, but he found himself surrounded by explosive paper tags and a hole in the ground which was being filled up by the protective beetles. "Fu," said Naruto as the paper tags blew up around him, burning him into beetles, leaving the wet ground singed, which quickly became wet again from the rain. "I got you," said Tenten, who was panting from dodging all the lightning. "Neji, is it over?" asked Kiba. Neji, using his Byakugan, was able to see the cloaked man laying on the ground face first, until it blew up in a cloud of smoke. "Shadow clone," thought Neji. "Everybody don't let your guard down," he said. But he was stopped mid-sentence as something burst from the ground in front of Kiba, where it slashed him horizontally across the chest, and vertically on the left side of Kiba's chest. Naruto must have replaced himself with a shadow clone, before he pierced the bug shield. Kiba coughed up blood as he looked up at his attacker, and he saw the black-clad man holding his crackling sais stand above him. Akamaru, seeing his friend and partner hurt and in danger, leaped to Kiba's aid, only to be brutally kicked away from Kiba by the cloaked man. "Dogs should stay in kennels," spoke Naruto coldly as he stared at the downed Akamaru, who was whimpering from the pain the kick gave him. Shikamaru, acting fast, and with the minimal light that he had prepared his shadow paralysis jutsu to capture the man. When Naruto saw Shikamaru's shadow coming towards him, he jumped away and threw some kunai at the Nara air. However, they were deflected by some shuriken thrown by Tenten. Kiba, his body was numb, did his best to crawl away. Luckily for him, Naruto miscalculated the length of his sais, otherwise Kiba wouldn't have got off the ground. But his body was still numb. Naruto was currently engaged in a weapon battle with Tenten and Lee. Naruto's electrical sais cut through any weapons that Tenten used, and had to switch stances for Lee's taijutsu style was getting annoying. And he had to jump away from the swarm of chakra training beetles encroaching on him by Shino. He was a good distance away from the group, and decided to wait for their next move. Tenten took out a medium-sized scroll, and prepared her next technique. She pointed the scroll at Naruto, who raised his eyebrow in curiosity. And then thousands upon thousands of kunai flew at him with alarming speed. Knowing he couldn't dodge the kunai, Naruto sealed his left sai, and unsealed the kunai where he threw it at the oncoming barrage. The kunai hit its mark, which was another kunai. Where a chain reaction happened, where when a kunai hit another kunai, and so on and so forth. Where all the kunai were redirected from their original path. "No way, that move couldn't be dodged, it can only be blocked," but instead he used a single kunai to redirect one of my strongest techniques, thought Tenten in amazement. Naruto went through some hand seals, and prepared his next jutsu. "Wind release, Orchid Sky," yelled Naruto as he held out his arms, and a vortex of scathing wind as tall as him appeared, tearing apart the ground. Neji, with his quick thinking, jumped in front of everyone, and performed one of his signature jutsu. 8 trigrams, palm rotation, roared Neji as a rotating shield of chakra appeared, blocking the wind and dispersing it, while protecting his comrades. "Damn it, we're barely scratching the guy, and he's making us look like children. I thought our last strategy with Tenten's explosive tags and Shino's bugs would work, and not only that, this guy's aware that the environment gives him the advantage, because of the rain," thought Shikamaru, who was trying to formulate a plan to beat this guy, but he had yet to show most of his abilities, so planning a strategy against him would be difficult. Naruto looked at his jutsu's effect. It had quite literally torn the ground apart. It was a jutsu of his own creation, and later he taught it to Madara, seeing as how he could use wind release as well. He then heard a whistling sound coming from his right, and saw Lee soaring at him with his leg extended. "Dynamic entry," yelled Lee as his foot met Naruto's arm, who attempted to block it. The blonde had to admit Lee's taijutsu was strong, and that kick had made his arm go slightly numb. But Lee wasn't finished, so he continued his assault. "Lee Furking," roared Lee as he started smashing Naruto with his feet, and because he was so close he couldn't properly defend against it. Lee kept hammering at Naruto with mighty kicks, where with each kick Naruto went up a little in the air, and finally Lee's foot met Naruto's head in a heel drop, and Naruto plummeted to the ground where a dust cloud appeared. Naruto's barrier seal didn't act up because Lee's attacks weren't fatal. "Alright Lee, kick his butt," cheered Kiba as the lightning wore off his body, and received a bark from Akamaru. "Yes, the power of youth flows through me," screeched Lee as he pumped his fists in the air. It was a good thing nobody could hear him outside the silencing barrier. Naruto got up from the small crater left behind by his collision. He was relatively fine but a bit sore, and his cloak was a little dirtied, but the rain would wash away any dirt. When Lee saw this, he ran at Naruto and cocked his fist back, ready to hit the cloaked blonde. But that was what the Uzumaki wanted. "Lightning release, lightning coffin," said Naruto as he held out his hand, and a ball of lightning chakra engulfed Lee, who was now being shocked by the electrical currents, and Naruto's hand was connected to a rope of lightning which connected the lightning coffin and him. Kiba and Akamaru sprang into action. "Ginga!" bellowed Kiba as he and Akamaru started to roll in a buzzsaw-like way, eviscerating the ground beneath them. Naruto performed some one-handed seals. "Wind release, howling wind," yelled Naruto as he blew out streams of wind aimed at Kiba and Akamaru. The wind streams would have hit if it wasn't for the intervention of Shino and his insects. The insects were reinforced, and they used their numbers to quell the wind before it hit Kiba, who was still racing at Naruto. Seeing no alternative, Naruto let Lee go and allowed Kiba and his dog to sail right past him. Neji charged at Naruto as Lee was gaining his composure, and the Byakugan wielder was also joined by Kiba, Akamaru and Shino. They tried overwhelming Naruto, but to no avail. Kiba tried to claw at him, but Naruto would dodge, giving Neji the chance to seal his Tenketsu. But Naruto redirected his attacks, while also watching the cloud of insects that Shino would send at him. But Naruto was having fun. Even while holding back, he was enjoying himself. Battling his old friends truly gave him enjoyment. Neji was getting even more frustrated with this man. Even with superior numbers, this man was effortlessly fighting them all at once. "You're in my range," spoke Neji as a green 8 trigram circle appeared. "Gentle fist sword. 8 trigrams 64 palms," said Neji using his most powerful jutsu, and he struck at Naruto. 2 palms, 4 palms, 8 palms, 16 palms, 32 palms, 64 palms. Finished Neji as he sealed all of Naruto's Tenketsu. "It's over," huffed Neji, who panted a little. However, Naruto blew up in a cloud of smoke, revealing Tenten standing in his place. Neji widened his eyes as his teammate stood before him before she dropped on the floor. Naruto had replaced himself with Tenten at the last moment before Neji used his jutsu, therefore escaping, having his chakra sealed. Neji gritted his teeth at the underhanded tactic, and found Naruto and his lightning size a bit away. "How unyouthful," said Lee as he was attempting to control his anger. "We are shinobi. Deception is our greatest weapon. There is no such thing as a fair fight. As such, there is no such thing as honor," commented Naruto, which caused his enemies to frown. Naruto went through some hand seals. The others prepared for what was about to happen, while Lee took Tenten to safety. "Wind release. Chasing prey technique," yelled Naruto as he blew out numerous wind rabbits. "Please, as if bunnies are going to hurt us," yelled Kiba. "Let's go, Akamaru." "Itsuga," shouted Kiba as he and Akamaru flew at the rabbits like drills, decimating them. However, his technique would have been more useful in defending his comrades, as Shikamaru, being the slowest, did his best to dodge the incredibly fast wind rabbits. But when he moved, his flak jacket was shredded by the cute but deadly creature made of chakra. Neji was able to defend himself efficiently because of his Byakugan, and his Juken strikes were dissipating the wind rabbits. Lee was dodging the rabbits with some trouble. When he evaded, one another would come after him. Shortly, the rabbits dispersed, leaving a semi-wounded Shikamaru and perfectly fine Kiba, Lee, and Neji. Naruto, knowing Shikamaru was wounded, decided to take this chance to finish him off. "Damn it," coughed Shikamaru as he saw Naruto racing towards him. Shikamaru, in a last-ditch effort, prepared to use his shadow paralysis jutsu. But he couldn't form the seals fast enough, and Naruto was already on him, prepared to stab him in the neck. Time slowed down for Shikamaru as the side drew closer towards the kill. "Oh no, you don't," came a raspy voice, and the ground started rumbling. Naruto had to steady himself from falling over, and he looked to his right to see a literal human boulder with spiky, sharpened hair. "Will the interferences ever end?" said Naruto to himself. He backflipped away from the human bowl so not to be crushed under its weight. "Shikamaru, you okay?" asked the boulder, who Shikamaru saw was Choji. "Yeah, I'm fine, but be careful. This guy is amazingly fast, and the weather is on his side as he uses lightning and wind attacks," explained Shikamaru as he held his side in pain. "Yeah, I saw the lightning while I was walking around He Village, and yet I couldn't hear any thunder, so I knew something was wrong," spoke Choji, who was joined by Lee, Neji, Kiba, and Choji. "The best thing I can think of to help you guys in this situation is to attack him all at once, so therefore he can't react to every attack," said Shikamaru as he grimaced a little, and he noticed that his side was bleeding badly. "Cool, help is already on the way. We just need to stall until they arrive," spoke Choji. "Alright, let us go, my youthful comrades," said Lee, trying to muster everyone's confidence. Naruto threw one of his sais at Lee, where it hit him in the chest, and penetrated a good deal through his flak jacket, and the sai had a lightning rope connected to its hilt. Naruto pulled himself towards Lee by utilizing the lightning rope, and he prepared a jutsu with a one-handed seal, a jutsu of his creation. "Wind release, billowing gale sides," shouted Naruto as he threw the wind scythe as Lee, where it slashed his shoulder, where it started to bleed heavily. Naruto performed a flying double kick on Lee's face, which sent the green-clad boy shooting away, and hitting a building, making a large dent in the stone. Naruto landed on the ground, and performed some more hand seals. "Lightning release. Thunder Lion Shockwave," yelled Naruto as he aimed his jutsu at Choji, where a lightning vortex twice the size of his hand with the head of a lion in the center flew at the Akimichi. Because of his great size, Choji wouldn't move as fast as opponents such as Neji. But unfortunately, it was thanks to Neji that saved Choji's life, where he performed that annoying rotation technique. Shino pointed his arm towards Naruto, and his chakra-enhanced bugs flew at him. Naruto went through some more hand seals. "Fire release, triple flame claw," Naruto gathered fire chakra into the palm of his hand, and drew an inverted red triangle made of fire chakra with claw-like tips on each points of the triangle, and fired it like a single beam of fire with the claw tips guiding it. Within moments the bugs were engulfed by the intense heat of the flames. All the Konohinin got out of the way of the fire beam, so not to be incinerated. It would have been stronger, if it wasn't for this downpour. Despite the amount of wind blades my jutsu can create, the bug's number would have overwhelmed it, and lightning jutsu would be too precise, so fire jutsu was what was needed. Lamented Naruto. Choji charged forward at his black, cloaked enemy and used one of his clan's signature jutsu. Partial expansion jutsu. Choji's left arm grew suddenly larger, and he was about to hit Naruto. But the Uzumaki's speed was far greater than the Akimichi's, where he ducked under the attack and stabbed Choji in the armpit, hoping to puncture a vein that was connected to his heart. A quick, easy but bloody kill. However, Naruto missed, and just ended up stabbing Choji in the armpit, but the numbness of the lightning caused Choji to lose control in his arm. Neji ran around Choji and prepared a powerful Hyuga jutsu. 8 trigrams vacuum wall palm. Shouted Neji as he sent 2 powerful waves of chakra, appearing as a vacuum shells at Naruto, who had jumped away from Choji. The chakra waves continued past him and tore up the ground. Itsuga! Yelled Kiba as he drilled his way towards through the air Naruto along with Akamaru. Naruto sealed his eyes and attempted to grip Kiba and his dog by the throat, and he was successful. With the help of his Sharingan, he could clearly see where Kiba's neck was. Once the Uzumaki had hold of them, he slammed the dog and the Inizuka together, producing a yelp from Akamaru and cry of pain from Kiba. He smashed the 2 partners against the ground, where he stomped on Kiba's head, knocking him out, and kicked Akamaru away from his best friend. It's like nothing works against this guy, shouted Choji in frustration as he gripped his useless left arm, as he watched Naruto easily deal with Kiba and Akamaru. As Neji surveyed the area, he noted that Shikamaru and Lee need medical attention, and soon, Tenten and Choji would be fine. So it was only him, Shino and Choji with his remaining arm. Neji just hoped that help would arrive, and very soon, because he was low on chakra, and Shino was tired from battle. But there was something strange. This guy had used a number of what Neji believed to be high-level techniques. So why wasn't he running low on chakra? Shino prepared one of his jutsu with what remaining energy and chakra he had left. Mashitatsumaki bellowed. The usually quiet bug user as a literal tornado of insects flew out of his sleeves and aimed at Naruto. You're not the only one who can utilize animal-based ninjutsu, thought Naruto. He sealed his left eye and held out his left arm. Vanishing 100 bats, whispered Naruto as numerous bats flew out of his sleeve and attacked the insect tornado. Now, since bats are the mortal enemy of insects, the insects were defeated, eaten quickly by the bats, much to the shock of Shino. Bats, commented Neji, as it was peculiar as he had never heard of there ever being an animal contract for bats. I've grown tired of this skirmish, spoke Naruto blankly as he had indeed gotten bored from the fight. He went through the hand seals of his favorite jutsu, the improved version of the first jutsu he ever made. Wind Release. Great Dragon Breath Jutsu. Naruto blew out the head of a massive Japanese dragon that was at least 4 times his size, made of eviscerating wind with fierce speed. It easily dwarfed the cloak blonde in height and width, where it was as large as the fire release. Great Fire Annihilation Technique. Neji prepared the last of his chakra to achieve another Kaiten 1 3 times as powerful as usual. Choji and Shino jumped away from Neji and each other, where they were now separated. Choji used his one good arm to ready himself for the next part of the fight, where he enlarged it with his chakra. The Wind Dragon had hit Neji's Kaiten dead on, and the Hyuga had trouble trying to hold it back. The sheer power of the jutsu amazing, he couldn't keep up his Kaiten for long. Shino, however, was at his limits, but he could feel the shadow standing behind him. When the Aburame turned around, he bore witness to Sharingan eyes staring into his own. But he also got a good look at his enemy's face, and he widened his eyes in recognition. Granted, there were differences, but the resemblance was there. Time slowed down for Shino as he collected his thoughts. So, it's you. You've changed a lot, you've gotten powerful, but there's something about you, as if you lost your emotions and now, you're a hollow vessel, empty. The question I should be asking is, why didn't you return to the village? But I can see why, and in a sense you have returned. Just so you know, I'm sorry. Why? For never being there, when you needed me most. Naruto. Were Shino's last thoughts. Naruto slashed him across the chest, stabbed him in the lung, slit his throat, spun around to his side, and stabbed him in the neck, efficiently ending Shino's life in the world. However, Naruto felt nothing, no remorse or regret. He felt nothing. He watched as the Aburame heir's body fell lifelessly to the ground. Neji, using his Byakugan, saw everything that transpired, and he was of course shocked, but he couldn't do anything about it, because he was holding the Wind Dragon back to protect him and Choji. Now on to the rest, said Naruto emotionlessly. But something landed in front of him, causing him to pause. It was an explosive tag, and was already about to blow. The tag went off, causing a small explosion and a dust cloud. A silhouette appeared from the cloud, revealing Naruto with his eyes in a defensive position. and he looked up to see the source of the kunai. Kurenai Yuhi. And she was absolutely livid. She couldn't make it in time to save her student from being murdered. But watching it happen, and in such a brutal way. "You'll pay for this," said Kurenai with a large amount of killing intent, but Naruto brushed it off. Madara gave off more killing intent in his sleep. Kurenai took out a kunai ready to engage Naruto. "Sorry, but I don't feel like giving you money," gestured Naruto as he readied his size. But his mind paused. He could feel a lot of chakra signatures heading towards his location. He had already spent enough time in the village. It was time to leave. "It's been fun and all, but unfortunately there's something else that draws my attention," spoke Naruto as he dispersed in a cloud of bats. "You're not getting away," howled Kurenai, as she gave chase to the bats. But the flying rodents were too fast for her and they got away. Kurenai stopped running and dropped to her knees and broke down into tears over the death of her student. Where later Hinata and Asuma would console her. But still that man would pay. A large swarm of bats were flying towards the base Naruto had dubbed the mountain's graveyard. He had been growing something there for months, and it should have been finished by now. The rodents dive-bombed each other in their usual fashion. And out of the cloud came Naruto gracefully landing and walking towards a certain room of the base. He also noted that there was now windows hewn from the rock. The white Zetsus had been working hard to create the base, and it was now coming to fruition. But the training ground was still a thorn, it wasn't complete yet. Naruto stopped walking as Zetsu materialized from the ground. "Did you have fun in Konoha?" asked White Zetsu merrily. "Surprisingly, yes, I did have fun, but yet I still feel empty," spoke Naruto to Zetsu. Zetsu nodded at Naruto. "It's fully grown now," said Black Zetsu. Naruto smirked. What he had created was finished. He had started growing it even before the old goat's death, Naruto's nickname for Madara. "Leave me, Zetsu, I need to be alone for this," said Naruto as his smirk disappeared, replaced with his emotionless visage. Zetsu nodded and melted into the ground. Naruto restarted his trek towards a very specific room in the mountain's graveyard. He reached the room where he had been growing his project. The dark hovel which he had lived in for more than 2 years of his life got a makeover. There was now concrete lining the walls and floors, and a single throne stood near the edge of the concrete, where a large cliff was located. Suspended before the throne was a giant tree resembling a lotus flower, and atop the flower, and its petals sat the Gato Mazo. The tree itself was as tall as the cliff, and below the tree was a flooded area. Naruto brushed his hand over the stone throne, admiring its craft. He sat down and rested his arms on the rests. He didn't remove his hood. It was either he was too lazy or he couldn't be bothered. But he focused his attention on his project. "It's been a long time, far too long since I last saw you, father." And there, growing on a petal, was a living clone of Madara Uchiha created from his cells. 8 hands were suspended around the living clone. And like Hashirama's living clone, this one will spawn Black Zetsus with the statue's power as a catalyst. I wonder if you're watching over me, right now, wherever you are. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.